G'day guys, it's Kelvin from the Cartoon Company in New Zealand, and we're going to discuss reflashing. I'm going to answer a couple of questions that I've seen that I hadn't even considered. Right, I'm standing by Callum's car. So Callum's car has already had a reflash once. It is a New Zealand new 2005 LS430. And the reflashing of Lexus computers, or of the LS range, started in earnest from the LS430s when they came out, first produced 2000. And yes, the guys in America say there was no 2000 LS. Well, they actually started getting produced at the end of 2000, so the rest of the world can see a 2000 model LS430. And it's when they went to the wedge shape ECU. Now the question that actually got me, and I hadn't even considered of answering, is what is a reflash? And of course, for guys that drive their cars and don't fix cars, there's a valid reason for not knowing. But a reflash, well, if we went back in time, one time we'd call it a chip. We were chipping the ECU. It's when that, but back then they used to actually physically remove the chips from the ECU, and then they would reinstall another one with a modified program in it. These days we can hook up our laptops, we can draw the data or the information, the program, calibration files and information out of each ECU. We can then put it into another program, alter those parameters and put it back in. Now guys will tell me things like, well, Toyota did that, Lexus did that, there's no need to make it better. Well, in fact, if you've driven a standard car and you back to back put a modified ECU in it, these cars transform. No, they're not going to produce 150 more horsepower. But what they do get is they get this big punch in the mid-range. We're not just modifying engine, we're also modifying the transmission shift, so the shifts are sharper and quicker and nicer. The engine power, mid-range torque, it gets this big wallop of mid-range torque, and then it gets a little bit extra for the top end. So to summarise that, a reflash is modifying the program or the parameters of the factory ECU to improve the running of the car. And now I do a lot of engine swaps, so some other stuff that suits me is getting rid of the automatic transmission, so run it as a manual, and getting rid of the immobilizer, and that was a big one and a big advantage for me with the 3UZs. I personally drive an LS430. I just bought another one in the back paddock. I don't know if it's ever going to go on the road, might just use for parts. And I've also borrowed Callum's because we were doing some testing on trying to make them run better with a manual, just updating and changing files. We needed a running car to test it on. And we needed a 6-speed, which this is the 6-speed version. Now, what I would normally do is I would normally unplug this ECU. And I'd pop it over to the bench and I would reflash it. I've also got the engine cover off here. I was going to do a video on the noise that these fellas make, and because they go sugar, 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 like a noise movement when these brake or these hoses split. But unfortunately, the ECU I was working with had some of those parameters taken off because we were doing that testing. I've also got the equipment to check some fuel pressure on these as well, which I thought might make an interesting video to show you guys how to check the fuel pressure on these LS430s. Now there's often some discussion over the hard shift problems that the 6-speeds have. Callum's car, he bought it very cheap. because it had suffered a computer issue for the hard shift. It was shifting the transmission harsh, and fortunately for Cullum, but unfortunately for the last owner, he drove it until it broke the transmission. Now, a reflash does not fix problems, mechanical problems, or a electronic component fault in the ECUs. Okay, we are changing parameters. It's not designed as a repair. Cullum's car has actually got a broken transmission because that ECU wasn't replaced, and I'm going to do another video on transmission solenoids and testing, and then doing a service on it. We'll see if we're going to save it. I suspect it's going to fail, but we're going to give it a try anyway. Now, other little bits and pieces we can do. If you're doing a swap, we can get rid of those sub-oxygen sensors, or we can do it in your factory cars too. So your secondary oxygen sensors, we can get rid of them. You don't need to run them anymore. We can get rid of some emission monitors, and that can make some problems for you guys in the US, where there are restrictions on modifying of emissions. So keep that in mind. And it's probably a good time to state that I'm not the only one doing this. So I do receive ECUs from all around the world. We've got some associates. We have Brandon in the USA, so quantumauto.com. He does a lot of these because he's in a great big market in the USA, and there's a headload of those cars in the US. There's Chris at Phoenix Engine Management in the UK. He does a lot of engine wiring, does beautiful wiring of both standard and aftermarket ECUs, and it does a lot of swaps. And then we've got Yuri in Russia, and he generally has a lot of engine swaps, as his tend to be his market for the vehicles that he's working on. I probably should note too that there is some of the IS300s that can be reflashed as well, and we're trying to fight the misinformation of that a lot of guys say they can't be done when actually we can. The 2GR is another engine that is becoming very popular for reflashes, and those things are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. The power they produce, they're getting just amazing figures out of them. So we all kind of work together in our respective markets, and we bounce ideas off each other when we're doing these sorts of jobs as well. Okay, so I've removed an ECU. In this case, let's say the customer has sent it to me. Normally I would bring it in to my garage, my workspace. I would plug in my test loom, connect it to a battery. I have my adapter, my laptop, information out of there. Modify to give greater throttle response, better power, upgrade transmission shifts, remove the emission monitor as example, maybe pop some bangs in if people want it, not even wants that, and then we fire it back into there. Because this one, I have got a car here, I am going to do things just a little bit differently. So that's Cullum's ECU plugged back in, and come into the cabin, and I have my dongle, my adapter plugged in to the OBD2 port, and I have my software up on my laptop. So I grab a file and I push right. And we're going to go through now, of course, and load that program, the modified program, into Cullum's ECU. 99% of what I do, just got to turn the key on, sorry. 99% of what I do them on my bench because the ECU is sent to me. Oh, we're going to beep at me. Goes through the process and it flashes that data into these ECUs. Now, what are you going to get? What advantage are you getting? Better throttle response. Transmission's going to work better. Of course, when those monitors get moved, or the emission monitors can be changed, we can remove immobilizers. All those things can be done. Is it going to give huge amounts of horsepower? And these guys keep asking this. Single stage TCM, yes. That's the TCM, or the transmission control unit, has just been done in the time I've been sitting here. The engine file's going in now, and as I was saying, guys do ask, hey, how much power am I going to get? And it's going to alter between the setups on your cars. And just got to turn that ignition on. Every single one of these we get a noticeable difference. And what I'm going to do is we're going to come through and we're going to do a dyno run with 2 different ECUs. I've got to mate with a dyno. I've got some time, and we'll actually physically show you the difference. Instead of just saying, hey, you get a 5% mid-range and a 5% top end, we're going to actually sit down and show the differences. But a dyno sheet isn't going to show the most important thing is the change in drivability. And that's because of the transmission improvements. And every customer that I says it transforms their car. Well, I've just got to grab a second file. Pops and bangs. Not everyone wants pops and bangs, okay? Some guys like it, some guys don't. I do about 80% non-pops and bangs. Popcorn, it's like that fart tune thing. And 20% with the pops and bangs. Now, in most cases, in the normal tunes, it doesn't affect your fuel economy. In fact, in many cases, you get better fuel economy. Once you learn to drive it in a way that you're just not enjoying the extra power and kicking it down and driving it faster and just enjoying the car. But if you drive it in the same manner as you used to, it'll go better and use the same amount of fuel. Or in some cases less. With the pops and bangs, we do lose some fuel economy because we kind of figure if you want pops and bangs, you don't really care so much about your fuel economy. But it isn't a massive change. Right, that file's going in. It's nearly done. We'll actually reflash that ECU in the time we've been sitting here, just chatting. Now, behind it, there's a few little bits and pieces of storing data from that ECU that we do have, and we're done. Now I can start the car. And now we can start the car. So to recap, reflash, modifying the factory program in a manner that hopefully improves it. Well, that's what our intention is. And it really does bring these cars alive. There is Toyota left lots on the table because they were so conservative in the market they were aimed at. They were going for longevity, and our tune doesn't affect the longevity, but we've managed to extract a little bit more out of it. Even on standard cars with a standard exhaust, it makes quite a difference. If you have a set of heaters and a bit different exhaust and maybe a different air intake, then again, that's going to really make those ones come alive. I sometimes have to remind myself the difference a standard computer makes, and when I put a standard computer back into my car, it becomes boring again, so I don't leave it like that for very long, and I put the nicer computer, the reflash computer on it. But I hope that has helped for you guys just explaining this process. There are associates around the world, and hey, some guys still, I do ECUs from all over the world as well. Now, one of the big fights that we're having, one of the big problems we're having, is there's still guys out there that says you can't reflash these, and that's totally incorrect. Or guys say you can only change a few parameters. If we can change the tune in the ECU to then accept a supercharger, there are some conditions on the sizing of the supercharger, but we've utilized the Tom's supercharger tune. If we can change the parameters that much, it's probably more than just a couple of parameters. So the guys that say that again are also not aware of what we're doing. And that stuff's coming from guys that can't do this. Okay, so trust the guys that can. There are hundreds of cars that myself and associates have reflashed around the world. Okay, so there are many, many happy customers. And they, as I said, it really transforms these cars. So I hope that's been helpful, explaining what the reflash process is and what it actually does. And we'll talk to you again soon. We'll catch you later.